Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us today for our virtual Pitch Rounds event focused on COVID-19. It's been a crazy spring, as I'm sure a lot of you know. We had our conference scheduled for the end of May and had to postpone that. We'll get more information to you all on that here shortly. But we wanted to be sure that we kept things going and tried to do what we could for companies in the region to help raise money and just get the awareness of what they're doing. So in conjunction, and John will talk about this in a minute, but in conjunction with the Southeast Life Sciences Alliance, we came up with this idea, and I think we've got a great group of companies this week. We had well over 60 companies apply for what became 17 slots. So I think we've got some really good companies. Today, I particularly like to thank our today's sponsor, which is Virginia Bio. John Newby is the president and CEO of Virginia Bio, and I'm going to turn it over to him.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for letting Virginia Bio support this great opportunity. It is a kind of a crazy time for everyone. It's filled with challenges and opportunity, but I want to thank everyone for making this happen, even in this environment. With all things going on, we could have just said, no, let's wait till next year. But with Jason's leadership and the leadership of our Southeast Life Sciences Alliance, we're making this happen. We're excited to do so. I'd like to mention the other members of the Alliance, Bio Alabama, Georgia Bio, Bio Florida, North Carolina Bio, and the North Carolina Biotechnology Center, South Carolina Bio, and Life Science Tennessee. This alliance is a big part of Southeast Life Sciences' success. We are working together to make sure that the Southeast is a world-class destination for life science innovation. Virginia Bio, we're proud to be the sponsor of this event. The life science ecosystem here in Virginia is strong, and we hope that you will see that fact from the several Virginia companies who are participating this week. Also sponsoring these events this week are Avanos Medical and also MRC Global. We will also like to welcome and thank today's judges. I'm just going to go through the list here. It's a great list of judges: Tina McKeon, Karen Zaderij, Lou Malice, Paul Gianeschi, Bob Crutchfield, Matt Cohen, Matt Dunbar, Randy Scott, Scott McCarthy, Dan O'Corn, Kyle Rose, and Daniel Bizzle. Now I'd like to kick it over to Fred, the mentor in residence at Duke University Office of Licensing and Ventures, member of Triangle Angel Partners, and a member of the Southeast Life Sciences Board of Directors. Fred will be moderating the session today. Fred.
Thank you very much, John and Jason, and welcome everybody to this virtual conference. And we've got a very good lineup of companies today. And the first up will be John Forrest from Verevas. And Verevas, with 7 pending patents, the core technology uses nanomagnetic beads that can identify, remove, concentrate, and measure select substances from patient samples to reduce the effects of problematic interferences and detect low abundance biomarkers to address unmet clinical needs for diagnostic testing with a unique solution to SARS-CoV-2 serology testing. So John, you've got the presentation up here. It's all yours, man.
Okay, fantastic. Thanks, everyone. And I'm John Forrest. I'm the founder and chairman of Verevas. I founded Verevas with the intent to improve laboratory results. And we will do that by focusing on preparing blood and other kinds of samples prior to testing to improve test accuracy and precision. Sample interferences are a major issue with diagnostic testing. Substances in blood, urine, and saliva can cause false results. You may have seen on TV, there's lots of reports about how the COVID tests are all inaccurate in some way, form, or another. Many of the issues associated with these inaccuracies are really due to interferences in the samples that are causing these problems. Another significant issue is the fact that many of these biomarkers, like the antibody, are just in low concentrations. They're just low quantities, and the technology today just can't measure them. So when the pandemic hit, we decided to do a pivot and focus on the SARS-CoV-2 blood tests to be run in a central laboratory. The data is looking fantastic. We're super excited about it. And this test will actually measure IgG and IgM antibodies, which is what is commonly done today. But it's also going to measure the IgA antibody, and this helps us with the confidence in our results. We're also able to measure these low concentrations of antibodies. This enables us potentially as much as a 3-day head start or earlier detection of the antibodies than other tests. Not only will it measure human exposure, but it also will be the first test on the market to address or be able to measure immunity levels or how much antibody is present. If we can measure how much antibody is present, that provides new opportunities. So for vaccine development, we're able to validate if the vaccine is going to work. Or we can help determine if the patient is going to be a good candidate for plasma donation. We all know that there is a massive global need for these tests. Some estimates of the global need is around 10 billion. Some others are saying it's 2 to 3 times that. We just know that whatever we do manufacture, we believe that because we will have the most accurate test on the market, that we'll be able to sell every test that we can manufacture. Our current manufacturing capability is about 25 million tests a month, with a targeted price of $10 and a cost of goods sold at $2. This is comparable to other pricing on the market, and we believe that this will be a significant opportunity for investors. The Medicare reimbursement is $42 a result. We intend to apply for emergency use authorization. Simultaneously with that, we are producing data so that we can also submit a 510K so that we can have permanent authorization. We intend to have this test available in September of this year. So we presented our technology to a major national reference lab. And the chief medical officer told us that not only would we have the most accurate test on the market for the SARS-CoV-2 antibody, that we would actually be able to revolutionize infectious disease testing. And that is very much in line with our intent to disrupt laboratory medicine. So how can we have the most accurate test on the market? Well, we actually have 8 pending patents now, and we have a 6-step process in order to provide these great results. So the magic is we have these nano-sized magnetic beads. You see that this is in a liquid form. And when we add these beads to a patient sample, it will actually capture the interferences in the sample. And with a simple magnet, and I'll show you here, we can separate those beads from the patient sample so that they no longer can interfere with the test. We run this process again, except the second time, we are going to capture the antibody. And when we capture the antibody, we can separate that from the sample itself. So it's no longer in the blood at all. And the only thing that gets measured is a concentrated set of antibodies that's being measured. That enables us to have very, very good results. And as you can see, really within 30 seconds, we're able to separate these beads from the sample itself. So with this technology, we're able to not only develop this test for the SARS-CoV-2 antibody, we're able to leverage this technology to address other needs for the COVID problem. And we can do that by partnering with others. We can't do everything ourselves, but the technology lends itself to allow others to develop this test using our technology. So we have a partnership with True Diagnostics and Infecta Lab. They're developing with us a SARS antibody test for the point of care. So this is outside of the lab. We also have a potential test for an at-home test to provide results for the actual antigen or the virus itself to see if anyone is infected. And if the data pans out, we expect it will, we should be able to receive NIH grant funding to commercialize this test. Another exciting opportunity is a therapeutic. So we're working with an academic center of excellence in the Southeast to develop a treatment for COVID. And basically what we do is since we can concentrate the antibody, we can deliver that as a dose as opposed to a plasma transfusion. Lots of exciting opportunities. But irrespective of the SARS-CoV-2 opportunities, we've been developing fantastic products for the market. So this summer, we're introducing 2 additional products. Verevas interference will allow laboratories and other diagnostic companies to remove these troublesome interferences prior to testing to make all these tests more accurate. We anticipate that this is about a $50 million a year opportunity for Verevas. The other test is really exciting. It's the Verevas vitamin D 1,25 test. So instead of the normal 5 to 7 hours that it takes to prepare and run a test sample, typically in national reference labs, we can do it in about 40 minutes. That 6-fold improvement in time will help the throughput. And we think it's going to be a fantastic opportunity. And this is anticipated to be over a $100 million opportunity to us. Very, very exciting. We have some very significant competitive advantages, and these are part of our patents. But first, of course, we talked about removing interferences. We can make most tests more accurate. We also have the ability to measure biomarkers that nobody else can. And what's interesting too is that we can also run tests simultaneously. So when I was talking about the 3 antibodies that we're testing for the COVID test, we're running all 3 of those simultaneously as opposed to one at a time. This helps us to reduce the cost of testing as well as provide higher throughput. And what's super exciting is that laboratories don't have to buy new equipment to run our tests. They can run it on existing equipment that's available today and really at high throughput, up to 8,000 tests a day. In addition, we can work with all major laboratory diagnostic manufacturers to run our tests on their platforms. And we're already talking to most of them, all the major ones anyway. To be able to disrupt this space, I put together a fantastic team. Dr. Carmen Wiley is a board certified clinical chemist. She is also the president of the AACC. Josh Soldo is the inventor of the technology, and he's been in laboratory diagnostics over 20 years and worked with several major companies. Our CEO is Carol Streetman. He was the president of DiaSorin, and DiaSorin is a multi-billion-dollar global diagnostic company. We're excited to have him on board. Of course, Fred Bombach is very experienced in doing startups, and I'm an entrepreneur. I just want to make a difference, and so super excited about the possibilities. So right now, we raised $5.3 million in convertible notes. We are planning a Series A this year, and we have many, many options for exit. With all the things that we are doing, we think that Verevas is a significant investment opportunity. So if you're interested in investing, please let me know, and you can reach me at john@verevas.com. Any questions?
Hey, John, this is Randy Scott. When you talk about interferences, can you be a little bit more specific on what's being removed and what you're classifying as interferences?
Well, let's take, for example, the SARS-CoV test. If you have a common cold, you're going to develop an antibody for the cold. Well, that's in the coronavirus family. And so because a lot of these tests are actually picking up the common cold antibody when they should be picking up the the SARS antibody. That's one example. There are as many as 30 different substances in normal testing that are problematic. Things like biotin, which is a supplement, can interfere with as many as 9% of tests today. There's various heterophiles, that are very common interfering substances. Regardless of, there's lots of different things, but we can, target each individual substance that we need to remove with our beads, and with a different combination of beads, be able to remove all the significant ones so that we can improve the outcome. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. Thanks.
Okay.
And presumably you've validated this. I know there's not time in this presentation to go over all of that, but
yeah, we actually, these were all validated by the Mayo Clinic, and they're going to be publishing their findings soon. And we were planning to do it at the AACC conference, but I'm not sure. I'm assuming it's to be in the fall.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
And when do you
Next
expect
question.
to be cash positive?
Well, we anticipate, depending on the success of the COVID-2 test, we anticipate that we'll definitely be cash positive by the end of the year. This is a major opportunity. The margins are either $8, potentially, or $7 actually on the point of care test. On the point of care test by itself, we anticipate that we'll be able to start potentially be manufacturing up to 20 million tests a month. These are, massive opportunities. Do the numbers, it'll be very quick. The challenge that we have as a young company is making sure that we have enough money to buy all the supplies that we need, to get the test out so that we can sell them. And so that's certainly why we're looking to raise the money.
John, can you say a little more about your regulatory pathway and where you are in that process now?
Well, for the COVID-2 test, we anticipate that we'll apply for the emergency use authorization. We've already been in contact with the FDA. That will probably take place in the August timeframe. Typically that takes about 2 weeks for the emergency use authorization, but it can be longer. We have no control over that. So that's why we're anticipating a September launch. Again, we do plan to also file for a 510K. We're generating data as we speak for the validation, and we're also using multiple customers to help us validate and improve the product. So we'll have plenty of data to support the application, so we're not concerned about that at this point. We have a lot of things going on, so the vitamin D test does not need to be validated by the FDA. It will be a laboratory developed test, and we're working with an academic center of excellence in Minnesota to develop that test to market. The interference test does not pre-treatment solution does not need FDA approval to begin selling. It will need approval if we use it within diagnostic tests, and that will probably take about 6 months before that will be available. Does that answer your question? Just want to make sure.
Yeah, that's helpful. Thank you.
Okay.
We still have a few more minutes if we have another question. Anybody?
Hey, John, this is Scott. Congrats on the progress over there. That's great. Are you guys based in Charleston?
Yes, I'm based in Charleston. I founded the company here. We have a significant operation where we do a lot of the work. It's in Oakdale, Minnesota. We do a lot of work with some major organizations in Minnesota, so it made sense to have a lot of the operations there.
Yep.
Yes.
Just quickly, just on kind of clinician and lab tech workflow, how much are you kind of changing what they do today, or kind of adding time to the process to kind of remove interference, or grab the antigens, whatever you're trying to do? Could you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. The good news is, when I mentioned that we can run on existing equipment, and typically liquid handling devices, it's completely automated. So yes, we may add 15 minutes to a test. But we can run tests simultaneously. In our case, 3 at a time. They could be more. The other thing is that because it's automated, it'll just be put into the cycle. So yes, it adds a little bit of time, but by providing the improved outcome, you don't have all of the other downstream issues associated with trying to identify what is going on wrong with a particular result. And by having an accurate result, first, ultimately that's going to improve the overall operation and quality of testing.
Yep. Interesting. But from a training standpoint, or kind of getting lab techs up to speed, it sounds like it's pretty simple.
Oh, well, it can be done manually on the bench. In fact, I've posted a video on the process of what it looks like to actually do the process to remove interferences. If you want to take a look at that, I would recommend looking at that on the profile.
Yeah, we'll do. Thanks.
Sure.
Maybe one more minute for a quick question, giving John his 20 minutes.
John, could I ask a quick question on the back end of things? You're quick to market here, which is great because it sounds like there's interesting technology and a big need for this, but you're raising money for manufacturing. So do you have a place that you can start to prototype and do manufacturing now? And what's your timeline to being up to capacity to fill that need?
Well, the great news about manufacturing is that we can manufacture in bulk. This is a liquid reagent that we're doing that is used within the lab. We can manufacture this in large quantities, and in a single container be 10,000 tests, as opposed to having to manufacture these tests on individual kits, like 20 at a time or something like that. We can produce in large bulk, and that helps us to get to those larger volumes. And again, current capacity with our current equipment in our facility in Oakdale, we can manufacture about 25 million a month. Now we just don't have the money to buy all the supplies that we need to run 20 million or 25 million in the first month, but that will come over time.
Okay.
I want to hop in real quick. Sorry, Fred, to cut you off. I want to make sure we did get a question in the Q&A. What is the amount you're looking to raise this round, and what is the minimum per investment? Minimum investment per investor? Yeah. So for the convertible note is $25,000 as the minimal investment. It's an 8% return until conversion, which is a 20% discount. We have, of course, we're looking at a Series A, which is separate. In addition to help raising funds, we have discussed with several customers the potential of ordering significant volumes of tests up front, especially with the quality of this particular test. We think that there will be significant demand, and especially with large producers or providers of tests. So we think that there are opportunities when we show them the data that this will be such a unique test that they'll be willing to potentially help fund the manufacturing costs that we need to get the test back to them to make sure that they have enough supply. There's lots of different opportunities for raising money, and it's all about the data. If you have good data, lots of great things will happen.
Okay. Thank you very much, John, for the presentation. And I think it's time.
Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Very welcome. We'll move on to the next one. And while we're getting set up here, I'll introduce up next is Nick Delmonico from Strados. Strados Lab is building an easier way to manage respiratory health. The Strados wearable sensor and powerful cloud platform provides a hand-free, automated way to manage and remotely monitor lung health. Their real-time respiratory trending improves care coordination and population health for patients suffering from burdensome chronic respiratory conditions or who may be at risk for respiratory pathogen exposure. So we'll have it loaded up here momentarily, and we'll hear from Nick. There we go. We see it on the screen now, Nick.
Okay, great. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right, I see some head shaking, great. I'll go ahead and get started.
He's on mute. You're on mute, Nick.
Yeah, you're on mute.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. All right, thanks again, everyone. My name is Nick. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Strados Labs. And at Strados Labs, we believe in making every breath count. It's something that we've been saying now for the last 4 years. And a big part of that is because I myself understand what it feels like not to be able to breathe because of my respiratory condition. I've had asthma now for the duration of my life. And I've been asked a lot of times by my caregivers, how frequently have you been experiencing wheezing, coughing, or shortness of breath? And most times I can't really give them a good answer because I don't really know. And so our focus was to build a technology that allows us to get an insight into what's happening with patients' symptoms of respiratory conditions remotely and get that information back to clinicians in a way that allows them to intervene early and provide better care. Seem to be stalled here on my presentation moving forward.
Okay.
Oh.
You might select the arrow.
Oh, I can't use my keyboard. Oh, here we go. Okay, better now. So the big problem we're trying to solve and the challenge we see is that patients with respiratory conditions often end up back in the hospital at really high rates, and it's extremely expensive. For COPD in particular, patients end up in the hospital nearly 1 in 3 times within 90 days after the first hospitalization event. And oftentimes they end up on a ventilator, and if they do, their outcomes become much worse. And as I'm sure many of you can imagine what's happening with COVID, a lot of these same challenges exist, right? Patients start to decompensate outside of a hospital, and we don't know until things get really bad. They get transported into the hospital and end up in the ICU. So how do we recognize these signs and symptoms before it's too late? And the reason why we don't do that today when it comes to respiratory health is because, number one, patients, when they leave the 4 walls of the hospital, often are not monitored or measured effectively. We rely on patients to explain how they're feeling with journals, for example, I'm feeling better or worse today, to rely on what's happening and then get that information back to clinicians. So we don't get great data today. And while we would love to be able to send a therapist or a nurse back to the patient's home 24/7, 365, of course, that's very expensive to do, and we don't have the staff necessary to do that. So how do we get the information we need to try to avoid these bad outcomes from occurring? And so that's why we created the remote e-stethoscope platform technology, which is a personalized way to accurately collect and detect lung sound changes and breathing pattern changes, make that available to care teams in real time on a remote basis. It's a telehealth-friendly solution, a remote patient monitoring solution that can be scaled and integrated across a variety of care settings. How it works, as you see here on screen, I'll just let you listen quickly, is you wear the device on your chest or back, much like placement of a stethoscope. We have a medical grade adhesive that is placed on the device. The device is a rechargeable device. It lasts over 24 hours with one charge. You then recharge it overnight and put it back on the body. It transmits lung sounds and breathing patterns back to our cloud-based system, from mobile app or tablet back to a web platform. And we make all of those lung sound recordings and breathing patterns like respiratory rate and inhale-exhale ratio available to a clinical team on a remote basis. We then use our artificial intelligence system that has been validated across a variety of clinical settings to measure the frequency of coughing and wheezing events that occur. So you can use that as again, an objective recording of a patient's symptoms. As I mentioned, this is a system that has been clinically validated over the last 16 months across 4 different clinical trials. It's been used on over 100 patients from ER utilization all the way to the home. And we've been able to identify 6 times as many more abnormal lung sound events from our technology than just doing standard spot checking with auscultation from a stethoscope alone. And our accuracy of the algorithms are over 97% for detection of wheezing, coughing, and normal breathing patterns consistent with physician consensus. And really the most important and one of the more exciting data points that we've been able to collect over the last several months is this on the screen here, which is really, again, what we've been looking for a long time. Is this is an objective recording of the frequency of wheezing and coughing for a patient over a period of days. This patient was a 60-year-old severe asthma patient who had just come out of the hospital on day 0. We asked him to wear the device every day for 2 weeks. Unfortunately, this patient only made it 6 days in because every day, as you can see on this record, he started to feel okay. Things started to get better. His wheezing and coughing rate went down. And all of a sudden, for over 72 hours straight, he started to experience increasing levels of wheezing or coughing while he wore the device. And yet his symptoms didn't really report that things were getting that bad until the last day before he was admitted to the ER. And so our ability to collect this data and make it available to care teams may have been able to get ahead of this bad event. They could have done a telehealth visit, a remote patient monitoring visit, potentially changed his treatment and course of action to avoid an ER event. And for this patient, it actually ended up in an ICU stay. So exactly the event that we want to be able to get ahead of was what we were able to monitor and measure. And we're really the first of our kind to be able to do this. We're the only system that enables lung sounds and breathing patterns using a body-worn sensor that does not require a patient to intervene and record the data themselves. So we don't have to worry about compliance with the use of the episodic daily recordings, for example, like some of our competitors. And again, combining breathing sounds and acoustics allows us to get more enhanced algorithms and more enhanced information back to the care teams. It's a technology that is really exciting for clinicians in pulmonary and emergency medicine. It's something that, again, has gotten them excited to continue to work with us in clinical trials and to continue to roll the devices out from trials to commercial opportunities, including Dr. Hassan in Harlem, who's been using it for their ER triage for high-risk asthma and COPD patients. And we're also working with Dr. Rizzo from the American Lung Association on rolling out our platform for a variety of American Lung Associated related trials, including those with COVID-19. Our technology is a product as a service model. We have a $150 kit, which includes the device, the adhesives, the charging station, and we have our connected care platform. The platform is $5 per patient per month on a 12-month contract. And for any enhanced analytics that we provide or insights on a population health basis, that is an a la carte cost to the customers. We sell into large health systems and large practices that see high volumes of chronic respiratory patients, as well as high-risk patients in COVID-19. And our first area of focus is that 30 to 60-day window post-discharge as a transitional care technology. So we see the 1 million cases a year roughly. This is for COPD in particular, of pulmonary rehab that happens as a transition from the ER, and then ultimately expanding into longer-term, broader-based chronic care management across asthma, COPD, CF, IPF, as well as infectious diseases. And of course, our goal ultimately is to provide value to our health organizations by reducing ER utilization and relapses in a 30-day window. And as we continue to collect data in our initial commercial rollouts, we intend to be able to create risk-based contracting and work with payers to, again, be able to roll this out at scale when we're able to demonstrate those types of positive outcomes. In the shorter run, we see a lot of interest in using this as a telehealth peripheral technology. You can listen to lung sounds, and here we are on Zoom, and I have the device with me here. If I was a patient, I could be wearing it, and the doctor could be listening to my lung sounds as they would need to do over a telehealth visit. And that same technology can be used as a remote patient monitoring tool to be able to record those changes in lung sounds and review it as a care team. So there's a shorter term revenue model here that ultimately gets us to our broader term impact that we want to see. We've gotten a lot of amazing partnerships over the last 18 months, including KOL sites that we've done a lot of our clinical trials, and all those sites want to use this in a commercial rollout, right? They are all in accountable care organizations and managed care contracts, and they want to see reductions in ER utilization across these conditions and states. And we've also gotten a lot of interest from pharmaceutical companies, those who are doing infectious disease clinical trials in phase 2 and phase 3 as a objective way to monitor and measure patients' lung sounds. And again, with COVID-19, we've seen an even larger, expectation of getting trials done on a remote basis. And our technology enables that to be done while objectifying the data so that it can be used across a variety of clinical trial sites. So our goals over the next 5 years are pretty big. We submitted our 510K back in April for our first indication of use to allow us to be deployed in remote patient monitoring and telehealth settings. We are going down an emergency use authorization for the algorithms to be used in COVID-19 monitoring, since we are able to collect wheezing and coughing data with levels of accuracy that we believe are useful for COVID-19 trending. And that all allows us to get into our commercial space. We have an expectation of getting 4 accounts this year across our current trial partners, as well as some new partners we've been working with in our pipeline. And those contracts have roughly 100 patients on a quarterly basis that we enroll in on our technology. So we have a rollout plan that we're already in the process of developing and deploying. We'll talk a little bit more about that in our milestones section. But if we're able to get to, again, these revenue targets that we have over the next 5 years, given the investment opportunity here of doing the pre-A round, which we're currently financing, as well as the Series A that we intend to do early next year, there's a potential return on investment of over 116% IRR in a 5-year time window on a $206 million valuation at exit. And we see this activity across the board, building smart sensor enabling technologies into healthcare platforms, both in traditional medical device players like the ResMeds of the world, Covidien, BioTelemetry, Medtronic, but also seeing new age players as well, where Teladoc, making an acquisition of InTouch, which enabled Teladoc to get the hardware enabling telehealth technology they needed across the ecosystem, and Fitbit, of course, being a useful tool for medical grade sensor-based information for Google as well. So we see a lot of activity both from traditional players in medtech to your standard software integration technologies, where we see, again, an excitement around medical grade devices and data. So we have a lot of work to get done in a short period of time here. As I mentioned, we've submitted our 510K. We expect first feedback this week, which we're really excited about. We're pursuing an EUA around the algorithms for our technology, which helps us scale more quickly. We've already onboarded our manufacturer, which is in Suwanee, Georgia. They have capacity to make over 100,000 units per year. And again, we're ready to do that, but we need to raise capital in order to meet the demands of a market launch as soon as we possibly can. So again, why invest now? We have an amazing team with successful exits across the board. As I may have mentioned earlier, my co-founder and CTO were part of CardioMEMS, which was acquired by St. Jude Medical for nearly $500 million in 2014. And our chief medical officer has seen several drug launches successfully, as well as IPO exits in the medtech and biosciences space. The device is ready to go. It's manufactured today, and we're looking for capital to scale. And we've got a lot of really exciting data that helps support the underlying technology on our next step journey. So with that, I look forward to answering any questions you have and helping make every breath count. Thank you.
Thanks, Nick. We'll go open it up to questions now, please.
Hey, Nick, this is Randy Scott. So can you give me a few examples of when this is going to be prescribed? I mean, setting aside COVID, so let's assume COVID's in the rearview mirror at some point. So what are the instances where this is going to actually be prescribed, and what does that patient sort of journey look like?
Yeah, so there's really two major buckets here. I'll start with the outpatient bucket. This is essentially your pulmonary or primary care physicians who are managing these high-risk COPD patients or asthma patients, and they're looking at their patient lists, and they recognize that certain patients come into the hospital more frequently than others. And so if they see Mrs. Smith, who had just recently come out of the hospital, and she's in a follow-up, this would be where we would want them to prescribe the Strados technology. And they get a couple of benefits. One is it's a tool to help enable reduction of ER utilization, which is now something that they care a lot about from a quality and patient population perspective, but also they're enabling telehealth to occur with these patients. And so this allows them to get data for auscultation. So Mrs. Smith would be set up with the device that day. They can bill for that under the RPM code structures. They would explain to her how to use it, and then they would guide her to use that on a daily basis for the next, say, 30 days. And then after that, it would be really on an as-needed basis. So she would have that technology with her on a chronic care management perspective, but we'd really be honing in on the next 30 days. In those 30 days, we would collect lung sounds and breathing patterns, make that available for the physician and clinical team, and they would review it as part of their remote patient monitoring for Mrs. Smith. So they would go into the website, they would look at and listen to the lung sounds and make determinations on what to do next.
So the data collection is reporting is real time, or does she have to bring the device back in and put it in a reader 30 days later?
It's all real time. So it's all transmitting via Bluetooth. She could walk around wherever she wants in the house. It will ultimately always end up back onto the system. Even if she's not next to a phone, for example, we store it on the device and then it gets uploaded from there. Or if she charges it, it's always going to upload back to the cloud-based system, and then it makes its way back to the clinical team. It's for a telehealth visit, we can do a real-time sync, so we can have data go right back to them. We call that the streaming service. But for remote patient monitoring, it's a little bit asynchronous. It's more batched up on a daily basis. So it's not necessarily the type of technology that you're looking to intervene within a short window of an asthma attack, right? It's really chronic management of that patient.
Gotcha, thanks.
Nick, what's the potential for using something like this to collect real-world evidence on existing medication and help payers prioritize reimbursement for expensive drugs that really is a big cost piece for them?
That's a great question, and it's something that we've been really excited to hear even from some of our pharma partners, that they want this data as well to help them in their phase 3 and oftentimes post-market trials, to help them with efficacy and understanding of how patients are actually responding to their drugs, and if they can get the best data they possibly can. So there's the pharma side of it, but then as you mentioned, that also plays really nicely into a payer perspective, where we may be able to collect the data that helps actually demonstrate utility of the drug. So that may not necessarily be the best thing for the pharma companies, but it could be something that gets the payers really excited as well. So we are pursuing that payer path as well as a value-based payer path, of course.
Nick, this is
Nick,
sorry.
Go ahead.
Yeah. This is Lou Malice. Give us some color around your competition. Is there anybody out there doing or developing what you're doing, and what makes you better?
Yeah, so I'll go back to this competitor slide, and I think this is a really important thing for us to hone in on here, because this is not something that's done today. I think that's the most powerful overarching message that we want to share with people is there is nothing out there today that's commercially available that's listening to lung sounds, capturing that data without a doctor on the other end of that stethoscope, right? This is kind of a new way of thinking about auscultation data and using it for remote care. That being said, we see as our most direct competitors, a couple of companies that I put up here on the slides, and only one of them has a 510K clearance, and it's almost exclusively used for trials to capture coughing rates in an ambulatory cough monitor over 24 hours, but is not used as a clinical tool necessarily. We have some technical benefits over that technology. The simple way to describe what they do is it's almost like a lapel microphone and a battery pack. So it's not listening to lung sounds from the chest, it's listening to coughing from the mouth. So that's the major differentiator that we have is we can pick up respiratory rate. We're getting internal lung sounds, pre-symptomatic, subtle changes in lung sounds that do not necessarily make their way out of the mouth. And of course, for those that do like coughing, we can capture that too. So we get better data than that 510K cleared technology, which has gotten a lot of excitement from the chronic cough trial pharma companies. Outside of that, there are a few that are in development and working their way into market right now, almost exclusively outside of the United States. They have CE marks, they're based in Australia. And in those cases, the ResApp and the Wheezo, as I'm showing on screen, both require the patient to actually record either from the mouth or from the trachea, which again, we were able to capture the subtle changes without the patient necessarily needing to do anything. And so those are really the major differentiators. Of course, from an IP perspective, you know, we have our own unique way of capturing the data that does not infringe upon those. But this is new, and each and every one of us in this space right now, these most direct competitors are looking to take the market by storm. And we're proud to say that we already have a 510K submission in, and we're going to be commercially ready in a really short order here, and have U.S. presence. So we feel pretty good about where we stand with competitors. But we know this is a space that's going to get hot really quickly, especially if we can prove that this works and gives the value we expect it to give.
Thanks.
Okay.
Nick, I was wanting to understand the economics a little bit better. You referenced the RPM billing, but I'm not sure I understand the cost versus the payment for each treatment. And if you could also comment on the clinician's time engagement between doing a stethoscope listening versus the ongoing monitoring. Is it more time, less time for the clinician?
Yeah, so for the business model, again, we really wanted to base it around those RPM codes as our initial launch. So it's $5 per patient per month to record all of the lung sounds and make those available to the clinical team. And so if you compare that to their billable opportunities every month, if they bill for remote patient monitoring, of which we're automatically collecting all those data points, so we don't even need the patient to intervene to collect them, right? These are passively monitored data points of interest. They're able to bill about $150 through CMS per month. So this is not a big, eat into their margin. And if we do what we've looked at with some of our partners, rather than doing $150 upfront for the kits, we would smooth that out over 6 or 12 months. But it ends up being somewhere in the $50 to $25 per patient per month range, which is again, a pretty small, cost for them in comparison to the billable codes that they're getting. And I think to your point too, which is a really great value proposition that's gotten a lot of clinicians excited, is they're able to capture this data without requiring a home health agent or a respiratory therapist to collect it. And oftentimes the practitioner, the primary care, or the pulmonologist is left out of that analysis, right? If that patient is seen by a home health agent, the home health agent may say, hey, Mrs. Smith sounds clear today, or it doesn't sound great. But now this same data point is collected and shared across the entire care team, which helps them be more efficient and more effective. So they save time by getting better data that way. And it's gotten them really excited.
Okay, I think
Nick, I've got a couple quick questions if I can. Is there a specific target population that you feel your technology would be most appropriate for, something like COPD or emphysema patients? And then also, what sort of technology is required on the part of the patient? Do they have to have a smartphone, internet compatibility? I mean, things of that nature.
Yeah, so the target population is COPD. That's our biggest and broadest market as far as chronic indications. They have the highest costs, they have the highest relapse rates, and that's where we've gotten the most interest across the board for all of the work that we do. You may put in there severe asthma and IPF as well, right? Just that broader based, really sickly chronic respiratory disease patients, but that's our big bucket. So that's number one. And then number two, yes, it would be a smartphone. It's iOS and Android enabled, so it can go on either of those devices or tablet. And then we also, we would require internet connection to get the data ultimately to the cloud for a patient. So Bluetooth device and internet.
That's going to rule out some of the older folks. At least it would have my parents anyway. But thank you. No, that's great.
Okay, I think we will wrap it up here. But Nick, one question, it was the same question was asked at the last to make sure we have an understanding of what your ask is. You're looking for pre-seed Series A, I think it was, and you have some terms on that?
That's correct. So we've done a convertible note of $750,000 already that is extended out to $1.25 million. So we have additional $500,000 we're raising under a convertible note right now on a 20% discount until qualified financing. And then we'll intend to do a Series A financing early next year.
Okay. Good. Well, thank you very much for presenting this to us today. It's exciting technology. Next up, we have Jeff Klein from HanGenix. And HanGenix has developed a patented technology and developed and distributed an online training education platform to monitor and improve hand hygiene compliance in all healthcare facilities and eventually into other industries.
Hey guys, can you hear me?
Yes, Jeff, we hear you.
All right, good afternoon. So I'm Jeff Klein, I'm the CEO of HanGenix, and I wanted to start out the conversation talking about, well, let's see here, talking about the legacy problem that our technology's addressed right now, but then talk about what we've learned through the COVID crisis over the past few months, both challenges it's posed for us, but more importantly, opportunities that it's opened up for us, and what our plan is going forward. So if you think about it, we're a little over 115,000 deaths from the COVID virus right now. But meanwhile, year after year, when you look at both acute care hospital and long-term care facilities, approximately 500,000 people are dying from infections every year. And it's a problem that goes below the radar right now. But the number one cause of those infections is poor hand hygiene. People aren't washing their hands when they're supposed to. And the challenges in hospitals is they have no effective way of monitoring who's washing their hands. So they use manual observation. Essentially, a nurse walks around the units with the clipboard and they stand outside of the patient's rooms and they watch people entering and exiting the room to determine if they wash their hands when they're supposed to. So it's a broken system right now. They barely sample 0.5% of the hand washing opportunities. There's no specificity around who, when, and where hands are being washed. There's no individual accountability. And they're really monitoring the wrong things. So what happens at the doorway is irrelevant. It's what happens at the point of care when they're approaching the patient, if their hands are clean or not. When you look beyond hospitals, nobody is tracking hand washing at all. So some of the things that we've learned through COVID right now is if you even turn on the television, you cannot hear somebody not talking about the importance of hand washing right now when it comes to dealing with COVID right now. And the complete lack of visibility and accountability is becoming evident. And there's a lot of concerns right now around liability around this. There's still a lot of determination. Is there going to be full immunity or not immunity as far as folks being sued with COVID concerns within their facilities? So one of the things, we've learned, and I'm sure you guys have heard this from a lot of the companies that you're working with right now, things are challenging from a sales standpoint in hospitals. We were ready to move into commercialization in the first quarter. We had 2 customers set up and they had to postpone the engagement right now because no vendors had been given access into these hospitals. And I've talked to a number of healthcare executives, and they said, yes, in addition to that, some budgets are being cut right now. There's some financial uncertainty around hospitals. But what they all conveyed to me is that if you look at the long view, when we come out of this pandemic stage and hospitals start planning about what does the hospital need to look like in the future, what are the processes and technologies that they need to invest in to not only make sure that their patients are safe, but their staff is safe, they absolutely agree that our type of technology is exactly something that'll be a part of that conversation going forward. What we've done is we've taken this opportunity to really look outside of the acute care hospital space. And there are significant number of opportunities from nursing homes to dental practices to a number of other industries that I'm going to go into in a second that have created a world of opportunity for us right now as we go forward. And it's right there in front of us today. We've also started having conversations with other channel partners that are big players in some of these other industries, and they recognize the value of having this kind of technology as an offering with what it is that they do on a regular basis in serving their customers. So also, I'm preaching to the choir for you guys from a VC standpoint, where a lot of the VCs are obviously betting on the winners and losers coming out of COVID. So they're identifying in their portfolio who's going to prosper in this environment, and they're focusing their dry powder for them. And some of the ones that are going to be challenged by COVID, many of them will end up dying on the vine. But we've also been told that there is a lot of VCs that are looking to be opportunistic right now, looking for new investments in technologies that are positioned to really flourish, not only within this environment, but on the back end as we emerge to kind of a new normal going forward. So what are some of the industries we've talked about? Again, cruise ships, meat packing, food processing, dental offices. Nursing homes is a huge problem right now. There are no infection prevention standards in nursing homes right now, and that is absolutely going to change going forward. Just simply validating if staff are washing their hands before and after entering or exiting the residence room is the bare minimum that you can expect going forward in a lot of these facilities. And many, many other types of industries as they're looking to open up the economy here and create a safer environment for their customers and their employees going forward. So what does this technology look like? So what's unique about our technology is we use, and we have patents around this, is we use ultrasound or sonar technology. So if you're familiar with self-driving cars, ultrasound or sonar is what they use for that. When you back up and get close to something and it beeps, it's sonar. So whereas RF or similar type technologies, it's an omnidirectional signal that goes through walls and it's very difficult to contain. What's unique about ultrasound is it actually reflects off walls, it's directional, and the signal can be contained to the point where we can make very defined zones. So what happens is that, so there's a couple of graphic descriptions here. If we're talking about a food processing area where somebody is dealing with raw food and could potentially contaminate it, we could create a zone in that area that after they finish prepping the food, that they must validate that they wash their hands after leaving that area. Same thing with the dental practice. If they want to create a zone around the patient's bed there or the patient's chair, we can validate if people wash their hands before and after dealing with the patient at that point. And it goes on and on. So what happens is that there are audible reminders that can be triggered when somebody doesn't wash their hands upon entering or exiting that zone. And the way it's enabled is that we literally have a small chip that we put within the soap or gel dispensers that is triggered either by the vibration of a manual pump or the EMI of an automated pump that essentially gives somebody a token that's time-based. It says your hands are clean for the next 30 seconds or 45 seconds. So then when they enter that area, it validates, is this person just washed their hands or not? And it'll provide them an audible reminder. It can also be done without the reminder. If they're just trying to collect data from a reporting standpoint, it can do it without any kind of reminders as well. So to be more specific, So we can verify when somebody washes their hands. So we're time stamping when somebody washes their hands and recording. That data goes to the cloud and it's in a database. So they may be required to wash before entering or exiting the zone. It could be based on a timer. So folks like McDonald's right now, we're talking about, we want our employees to wash their hands every hour on the hour, just to make sure we're reducing the bio load on their hands. Very easy application. It could be programmed in every hour. The reminder goes off. They wash their hands. We validate that their hands have been washed at that point. It could also be set up that based on spending a certain amount of time in a particular zone, that triggers the need to wash their hands. Very easy to validate. Next is that we're verifying when somebody enters or exits a particular zone. Again, we can create very discrete zones as small as the size of a keyboard up to a very large room at that point. So we're time stamping that information. And if they want a reminder when hands are washed before entering or exiting, we can do that. And there are other protocols that we can enforce beyond just hand washing. And then the last thing we can do with this technology is essentially contact tracing. So we can tell you, for people that are wearing their badge, anybody that's been within 6 feet of somebody that's wearing their badge and how much time they've spent at that distance. So if somebody gets, and they can determine what the parameters are. If they think 6 feet is too far, if they want it to be 3 feet, 12 feet, easily programmed in there. So then if somebody gets diagnosed with COVID, they want to look back and say, who are all the people that came within 6 feet for a 30-second duration? Pull me the report on that. Let's go test all those folks. So if you don't want if everybody doesn't keep their cell phone with them at all the time, or they don't want the cell phone carriers to track their data 24/7 everywhere they go, they just want to track it when they're in the office or in a facility, it's an application that we can easily do with our technology. So just to give you an idea of the size of the opportunity. So when we were primarily focused on the hospital market, we do a SaaS model with this technology. So the pricing within the hospital was about $75 a month per bed. So around $1,000 a year. For a 100-bed hospital, it's $100,000 a year, which is the cost of a few infections in a hospital. So that's about $1 billion market within just US acute care hospitals. When we start looking at the other non-hospital opportunities, the market is dramatically larger than the acute care hospital. It also affords us an opportunity to price more competitively right now because the hardware requirements wouldn't be the same as the hospital. And we're working on a smaller, less feature-rich version of the product that'll allow us to get the cost down to have a smaller, more lightweight badge that's a part of this going on. So we're talking about markets in the tens of billions of dollars. There's more work to be done to determine exactly what the addressable market in each of these spaces are, but we know it's significant. So we have a very experienced team. Our core team has over 200 years of experience. We've worked for some world-class healthcare companies. We're beginning to bring on advisors in industries outside of healthcare right now, but we have a very deep and very experienced team that's out there. So our business model, again, we talked about the SaaS model. We are this week signing a distribution agreement with Henry Schein. So Henry Schein is the largest medical distributor in the non-acute healthcare space right now. We're also in conversations with Cardinal and Owens & Minor at this point, and we're beginning to talk to other folks that are large players in other industries like food servicing, like your Cisco's of the world, your Aramarks of the world. We've been in conversations with some of the large soap manufacturers, Ecolab out there, Gojo. So we're looking for a lot of partnerships. So rather than me building a 200-person sales force, Henry Schein has 500 salespeople that we can work with. So our plan right now is to focus on a couple of key markets. So here in Georgia, and then my co-founder is based in Florida. We're going to be attached at the hip with the Henry Schein folks as we go out and we pursue these other markets beyond the acute care hospital space. And we're very excited about that opportunity. So we come in with a holistic approach, so it's not just the hardware. So we have accredited online training. That's a part of what we do, not only just for the technology, but for hand hygiene protocols as well. So we have training that comes. Several of us have deep consulting experience. We've done a ton of process improvement types of engagements and change management projects. So that is a part of the plan that we work with in the hospital going forward. It's an additional source of revenue for us as well. We believe there's a real opportunity for data and analytics beyond just hand hygiene. This can easily do a time and motion type study for hospitals. We can track their environmental services workers. So are those folks going in the rooms they're supposed to clean? When they're supposed to clean it? How much time are they spending there? Are they going in the bathroom? Are they approaching the bed? Management in that field has no visibility to what their staff is doing all day. We can provide them that kind of insight that they need right now. So a lot of what we had done up until moving into commercializations, we were done smaller paid assessments. So where we'd install the technology for 90 days, give them a baseline understanding of what their true compliance rate is, because many of these hospitals are reporting to management that they're 90% compliant, and they're just not. We have never been to a hospital that's been over 50% compliant when we've actually done the data and presented it to them. And I can tell you anywhere else outside of these hospitals, it's going to be significantly lower at this point. So that's been very valuable information. And then when we turn the reminders on, the compliance rate has jumped up at least 50% every time we've done these assessments. We have a peer-reviewed, published clinical study that validates the accuracy of our technology as well. Another area we're looking to take advantage of, and I guess a lot of you guys probably know this, there's a lot of federal money coming to the states right now to address the COVID challenge. So what they're doing is these dollars have to be used by the end of this calendar year or they lose them. And there's specific criteria in which it needs to address specific COVID concerns. Our technology fits right in the sweet spot of how this money can be spent. So in theory, a VA hospital could actually put in our technology for free and use this COVID money in order to pay for it. And there's many, many, many other public institutions, whether it's public schools, government buildings, you name it, these dollars. So we are working with a lobbying firm actually out of DC who's got relationships with every state governor's office right now, working on getting us some face time with those folks so we can pitch our case. All right, so where we are from an investment standpoint. So we had initially raised $750,000 in convertible debt. Last year, we started a Series A where we had an initial investor, a lead investor that put in $1.5 million. It was a $2 million Series A. We're looking to bring in additional investors to go along with our lead investor on this one. So we're looking to raise an additional $500,000 to $1 million on that Series A that's still open at this point. Going into Q1 or Q2 of next year, we'll look to do a Series B at that point and look to scale the business. And that'll probably be in the $3 to $4 million from a Series B. But we're focused right now on this opportunity right in front of us to really pursue some of these alternative markets beyond the acute care hospital space. So I'll stop. I hope I didn't go too long, and I'll take any questions you guys have.
Hey, Jeff, this is Randy Scott.
Hey, Randy.
So there's been a few other attempts, of course, to do, hand washing compliance monitoring. And I'm not sure what all the stories are, but it doesn't seem to have taken off. Obviously, the COVID thing could be a tailwind here, but is there some other reason that sort of differentiates why HanGenix will succeed where those other folks didn't?
Yeah, so there has been some level of success. There's a company here in Atlanta that's starting to get some traction, and the Ecolab's got a solution that they've gotten some market traction. But what they have realized is they are using RF with their technology, and RF has just caused problems from an accuracy standpoint. Because what happens is they're not able to create that zone. First of all, they're only able to validate if somebody enters or exits a room. Whereas the guidelines are now talking about you have to validate before and after contact with the patient. It's a completely different animal at that point. So there's been a lot of accuracy challenges right now. And I think we've seen a lot of tailwinds right now, even before COVID, when you look at how the bar is being raised as far as the impact on Medicare reimbursement is concerned, the number of lawsuits. We were starting to see a lot of momentum happening in this space. COVID's obviously slowed things down. But I feel very confident here as we emerge from this in the back end, hospitals are going to start to look even more closely at this going forward, as well as some of these other non-hospital channels as well. So ultrasound is the key, Randy. I mean, that's really what differentiates our technology from some of the others out there.
Thanks.
Thank you.
And Jeff, you might have mentioned it, but can you review for me again your intellectual property, what it makes it so that somebody else can't do the ultrasound idea?
Yep, so we have 3 issued patents, and I can always send those out to you guys if you're interested. Really, that talks about the use of ultrasound to create specific validation zones, and then validating that a certain protocol takes place before or after entering those defined zones through ultrasound. So it's a broad patent, but yet it really allows us to move not only within healthcare, but into other industries as well with that type of application.
Hey, Jeff.
Hey, Paul.
Good to see you again. How are you?
You too.
Question for you. And when you move potentially into some of these other markets who traditionally haven't utilized a technology like this, is there any way to actually verify that the operator truly washed their hands? And I mean, is there no way? I mean, if they go and stand in front of the sink and, you know, I'm thinking of like some 16-year-old kid working.
I know.
Yes. Just one of the quick, is there a way to, down the road, maybe to add something that would help validate that piece?
Yeah, so there's a few ways to go after it. So first of all, the way we validate that somebody actually puts soap on their hands. So the assumption is if you put soap in your hands, you're actually going to complete the process of washing them at that point. People can always game the system, but things we can begin to look at is, rather than a badge, there could be a wrist application, right? And you can put in motion detectors in a wrist to make sure that their hands are moving for a certain amount of time to validate that the hand washing took place. In hospitals, that's a little more tricky because they don't want you wearing jewelry, and a wristband could be a source of bacterial contamination in and of itself. But when you get outside of hospitals, that's not going to be quite as contingent. So I think that there's certainly ways to address that. I still think this is a huge step forward, validating that people are at least putting soap on their hands.
Very good. Thanks, Jeff. I appreciate that.
Thanks. Good to see you again, Paul.
And what about the cell phone as a point of potential contamination if it's an app-based?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that again, Tina? The cell phone? So we don't use cell phones with our technology.
Oh, I thought there was an app-based.
No, so we actually have a small lightweight badge that the individual would wear at that point. And we have a version where in a hospital, we have an embedded flywheel. So if they want to put their own picture ID on there, they can do that. And then we have a smaller version that's just standalone. So
they don't need to touch that at all.
Correct. Yeah. Yep.
So Jeff, I'm just a little confused on the commercialization plan and the timeline. So you signed this agreement with Henry Schein, but Henry Schein does more non-acute care centers. So, great dentist office, that sort of thing. Is your focus in that, or are you focusing first on the hospitals? Where do you think you're going to get the biggest bang, and what's the revenue model based on predominantly?
So the answer is we're pursuing both right now. So if we were to go, we were all about hospitals, right? That was our primary focus going forward. And COVID has really changed things for a lot of companies, a lot of industries right now. It's just frankly slowed things down. It's hard to get into the hospital. It's hard to get the attention of decision makers, and it's hard to start these kind of engagements. So if we just banged our head against the wall and just went after hospitals, it'd be tough sledding for us for a while. We still strongly believe in the long play of this technology in acute care hospitals. But I wouldn't say, we're certainly not pivoting, but what I'm saying is we're exploring other markets that we think are frankly easier sells and easier installs and a larger addressable market for us right now. And the opportunity is now for those folks. So it will be essentially a software as a service. The pricing will vary based on the configuration right now, and it'll be probably zone based on how many zones that they want to create. And again, how many badges they need will determine the pricing on that point. And obviously there'll be volume discounts involved at this point, but it's a SaaS model is the revenue driver for us.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Jeff, I'm sorry if I missed this, but can you talk a little bit about the hardware component cost for the install?
So it's all wrapped. So I'll tell you about the components, and then the pricing is all wrapped into one bundled price for the customer. It will depend on the configuration. So there's a transmitter that's used to create the zone right now. First of all, everything's battery powered. So there's no need to find electrical sources or get an Ethernet drop or anything like that. So we put a transmitter where they want to create the zone, and then we have the ability to, define the size of that zone from that transmitter at that point. And then in all the soap dispensers, there's a small little chip that goes right in behind the battery pack or the soap within the dispenser itself. So it's agnostic to whatever soap dispenser it's using. And then the badges. So those are the three hardware components that are involved in that. Does that answer your question, Matt? I'm sorry.
Can you talk more about the cost of those components?
Yeah, so the cost will obviously come down. So that's about $50 for the bedside transmitter. It's actually about $50 for all three of those components. So the bedside, the chip itself, and the badges. But these prices, again, it's a 3-year contract typically, and this is very small volume pricing right now. So these will obviously come down as we begin to scale moving forward. And we're actually, part of what we're doing is looking to redefine a smaller, less expensive badge that'll bring the price down even lower, allow us to be more competitive from a pricing standpoint too.
And quick follow-up, does your team have to install the hardware, or does the hospital staff? Or
we install it now. I mean, our goal in working with Henry Schein, and we've talked to them about this, is we obviously want to babysit these going in early on. We're really using them to lead generate for us, and we will come in and support the installs, and we will scale our implementation team going forward. But because the installs are so easy, we will move to kind of a hunter account manager type structure going forward, where the account managers can also do the install, and eventually the Henry Schein folks will be able to do the install as well. We will begin to migrate some of that responsibility to them. I mean, it's literally, slide in the dispenser, put the chip in, and it's good to go. In a hospital room, we can install a room. I'm not kidding, in about 5 minutes, we can install a hospital room right now. It's that easy. So we will do the install, but as far as maintenance is concerned or working with the distribution partner, over time, we want to be able to move more and more of that to our partners.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I ask one more quick question about
Sure.
the Henry Schein relationship?
Yep.
Is it do they have exclusivity to any specific markets, and are there minimums built into their agreement where they've got to sell, X number of systems? Have you also projected what that revenue is going to look like?
So it's not an exclusive agreement on either party. We were selling to them at wholesale. We've given them some target pricing in which to sell. We have not baked minimums in. I think there's some collective discovery that we need to do within this marketplace before we actually lock into any minimums at this point. And what was the third question, Paul? I'm sorry. You said the minimums.
If you had any projections on revenues or things of that nature from these guys.
I think, and again, we don't, if I'm being honest. I mean, we've started to look at what the addressable market is. Obviously, you can see the number of dental practices and nursing homes. They're huge. We've obviously built some numbers into our financial model right now. But as far as the partnership with them, we haven't committed to any volumes here at this point going forward.
Any other questions? Well, thank you very much then, Jeff, and and to all the companies that presented, and especially the judges. And
Thank you very much to the to everybody, and thank you for the judges. And just the judges, let's hop on real quick right after this. I sent you an invitation. But for those that have been watching, thank you very much. If you have any comments on the application, please shoot me an email. Happy to take comments. They've done a lot for us since we started a few weeks ago, but you know, there's still improvements to be made. So if there's nothing else, have a good rest of your day. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Great, thanks.